The coat barely fit the man, but Lena draped it over his shoulders anyway. It was 2:13 a.m. The hospital's emergency lot was empty, save for the wee hum of streetlights and Lena's footsteps. Her shift had just ended. 12 hours on her feet, caring for patients, cleaning up after chaos, and praying the daycare didn't call again. She should have gone home. But the man on the bench, curled up, shivering in worn-out shoes and a torn hoodie, looked worse than exhaustion. He looked invisible. Without a word, she placed the coat around him, then handed him a takeout box, half her dinner. "It's still warm," she said softly. The man looked up surprised. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," Lena replied. "You're cold. You're hungry." She turned and walked away, thinking it was just another small act of kindness in a long, endless night. She didn't know he wasn't just a homeless man. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't forgotten. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, hiding in plain sight, looking for something money couldn't buy, sincerity, and tonight he found it. What would you do if a stranger gave away everything they had without knowing you could change their entire life? Backhand index pointing down, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the journey, because this story is only just beginning. Lena's alarm buzzed at 5:04 a.m., not that she needed it. Her body had long since memorized the rhythm of survival. She sat up slowly on the old pull-out couch, careful not to jostle the tiny figure curled beside her. Noah, 6 years old, still lost in sleep, one hand tucked under his chin, the other flinching gently with a dream. He made little humming sounds when he slept, always had, the same 3 notes over and over, like a lullaby only he could hear. The studio apartment was silent, the kind of silence you learn to cherish when life doesn't leave space for peace. Lena moved quietly, heated yesterday's coffee, put on the same black scrubs she'd washed in the sink the night before, rubber shoes by the door. Her name tag, bent at the corner, read Lena/HCA night shift. She packed Noah's bag, a PB&J sandwich, a small bottle of water, a box of crayons with only 9 colors left, and a hand-folded note that simply said, "You are everything." She always put one in. Noah couldn't read them yet. Didn't matter. Lena was a night shift healthcare assistant at Jackson Community Hospital. 12 hours a night, 5 days a week. Sometimes 6 when someone called out or management got creative with scheduling. The pay was minimum wage plus a shift differential. Barely enough to cover rent, Noah's therapy, food, and the laundry machine downstairs that kept eating quarters. But she showed up. Every night. No complaints. No shortcuts. Because someone had to. By 6:45 a.m., she had Noah in his hoodie, backpack snug, and the two of them walking hand in hand 3 blocks to Gloria's apartment. Gloria was in her late 60s, watched Noah during Lena's shifts, and refused to take money. "This boy's special," she said. "You're doing holy work. Let me be a witness to it." Lena had cried the first time Gloria said that. Now she just nodded, heart too tired for tears. The hospital was never quiet, but night shifts carried a different kind of noise. Quieter emergencies, lonelier pain, fewer visitors, more ghosts in the hall. Lena worked the sub-ICU floor, changed bed sheets, wiped down machines, held hands when no one else would, listened to patients' mumbled dreams through morphine and fear. Her favorite patient was Mr. Tran, a retired teacher with lung cancer and no family. "You remind me of someone," he told her one night. "Who?" "My daughter. She didn't stay." "I'm not going anywhere," Lena said, meaning it. He smiled, eyes soft. "Then, you've already done more than most." But Lena's favorite part of the job wasn't the patients. It was the quiet between moments. The hush of a cleaned hallway. The scent of sterile wipes and peppermint gum. The second before a monitor beeped when the world felt still. It was in those moments that Lena could breathe, could remember who she was before life asked too much of her, before Noah's diagnosis, before his father disappeared, before survival became her only job title. She had no dreams of luxury. She dreamed of one thing, stability, enough to stay in the same apartment for more than a year. Enough to buy new shoes without checking the clearance rack. Enough to enroll Noah in a better therapy program. That was it. Her idea of a better life didn't come with marble countertops or vacations. It came with a door that always opened, a fridge that never echoed, and a son who smiled without worry. One night, just past 2 a.m., Lena was mopping the emergency hallway when she noticed the man on the bench, the one from the opening scene. She didn't stop because he looked special. She stopped because he looked forgotten. And Lena knew better than anyone. Being forgotten was worse than being poor. She gave him the coat off her back, the last warm food she had, and a smile she didn't know still lived on her face, and walked away. She didn't know that smile would ripple, that the moment she thought no one saw, someone saw everything. It started with a clipboard. That's how bad news always arrived in hospitals, not with a bang, but with a checklist. Lena saw it taped to the staff break room door. Shift reallocations. Her name was there, neatly, formally crossed out. No email, no explanation. Just a red line through her livelihood. She stared at it for a long time. Her heart sank. Her body, already heavy from 12 hours on her feet, now felt made of stone. 7 years of loyalty, of care, of quiet sacrifice. Gone. Erased with a stroke of a pen. Budget cuts, the supervisor mumbled when she asked. We had to downsize night support staff. But I'm not just support, she said softly. I run the floor half the time. I cover when people call in. I clean when others won't. You said. I know, Lena, he interrupted, avoiding her eyes. I really do. But you're not full-time. You're not union. She nodded, slowly. No fight left, just questions with no one willing to answer. By 10 a.m., Lena was back in her apartment. The silence felt crueler in daylight. Noah was still at Gloria's. She had time to think. Too much time. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. She counted bills in her head. The remaining grocery money. The unpaid therapy invoice. The rent due in 12 days. She'd already been skipping meals, already worn the same 3 uniforms for a year. There was nothing left to cut, nothing left to sell, except her peace. That night, she told Noah they were going to have a picnic dinner on the floor. 2 slices of bread, a shared apple, a paper plate of instant noodles. Noah clapped. Like camping? Exactly like camping, she whispered, brushing his hair. She turned away before he saw her tears. 3 days later, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. Just her name, written in perfect cursive. Inside, a prepaid phone. 1 contact saved as Noah's friend. And a note. This is not charity. This is investment. Keep going. Lena froze. Someone was watching, but not to harm her. To help. She didn't use the phone at first. Just stared at it. Left it in a drawer. Then on the counter. Then in her jacket pocket. She didn't trust it, but she couldn't let it go, either. A week passed. Then 2. She applied 9 jobs. Heard back from none. Sold her microwave. Then her coat. Then her blood. Still not enough. One rainy morning, she found a grocery bag by her door. Inside, a milk, cereal, a small box of art supplies, a note, for Noah, from someone who sees how hard you're trying. No signature. That same day, Noah brought home a drawing. It was of a giant tree, roots wrapping around a small child. Who's the tree? Lena asked. He pointed at her. But even kindness couldn't stop what came next. The hospital called. We heard you've been collecting food from patients' leftovers. Lena blinked. What? We received a report. You were seen giving meals to a non-patient. Outside the facility. She realized. The man on the bench. Someone had seen her. She tried to explain. It was food that was going to be thrown out. Still, it's a liability. They suspended her from the volunteer board. Her final connection to the hospital. The last thread, cut. That night, Lena sat on the apartment floor, knees to chest. Noah was asleep. Rain tapped the windows like it knew something was wrong. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the prepaid phone. Stared at the contact name. Noah's friend. And after a long breath, she pressed call. It rang once. then picked up. A deep, calm voice answered. Lena. She froze. I didn't give you that phone so you'd break, the voice said. I gave it to you because you don't. Who are you? She whispered. I'm someone who owes you nothing and still wants to help. She said nothing. He added, will you let me? A pause. Then, yes. The first time the phone rang again, Lena was cleaning floors at a local diner, one of 3 part-time jobs she'd picked up in 2 weeks. She nearly dropped the mop. Noah's friend, the screen glowed. She hesitated, looked around. The place was nearly empty. Just 2 men eating pancakes in silence. She picked up. How are you? The voice was calm, familiar now, not kind in a soft way, but kind in a steady way, like a hand held out in a storm. Working, she said. Always working. I want to help more, he said, but not with food, not with rent, with the future. She tightened her grip on the mop. What does that mean? It means there's more for you than survival. But to step into it, you have to stop walking alone. Lena didn't answer. The line stayed open. Just the sound of her breathing and his silence, patient. Then she whispered, what do you want in return? Nothing. No one gives without wanting. I saw you give your last coat to a stranger and walk away. No camera. No audience. Just kindness. And I thought this is the kind of person the world should be built around. She swallowed hard. Didn't know what to say. So she said the truth. I don't trust people who can change my life with one decision. I don't want to change your life, Lena. I want to give you space to choose it. That night, Lena told Gloria about the call. The older woman raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a test. Or a trap, Lena said. Maybe. But baby, maybe it's just a door. The next day, Lena received a package. Inside, a manila folder. No name. No return address. Inside that, a scholarship application for Noah. A recommendation letter from a pediatric therapist Lena had never met, signed, stamped, and submitted. An acceptance letter from a private autism support academy. Full ride. Transportation included. At the bottom, a sticky note in perfect block print. One yes can echo for generations. Lena clutched the folder to her chest and sat on the kitchen floor, shaking. She hadn't cried in months. But that day, she let herself. That weekend, she took Noah to a park he'd never been to. They ran between trees, laughed, played tag. He drew chalk rockets on the sidewalk and said, Can I be an astronaut, Mama? She said, You can be anything. And, for the first time, meant it. But the world didn't stay soft. Her manager at the diner found out about the scholarship. You know this smells off, right? He said. Nobody gives that kind of money without strings. Maybe not everyone is trying to take something, Lena replied. You ever stop to think someone's watching you, Lena? Like really watching? She had. Too many nights now, wondering if a camera was on her. If this was charity or a chess game. If kindness came with interest. Later that week, she called the number again. Why me, she asked. Because when no one looked, you still did good. You're rich, aren't you? Silence. Then, does it matter? She thought for a moment. It used to. Now, I just want to know if I'm being used. You're not. But I am using what I have to back someone the world shouldn't have missed. She didn't speak again. He ended the call with, Let me give you a chance to stand without fear. That's all. The rest is yours to choose. The next envelope was thinner. Just a check. $5,000. Enough to breathe. Enough to pause surviving and start planning. She didn't cash it right away, but she kept it, taped it to the fridge like a question waiting for an answer. Meanwhile, people noticed Lena differently. One patient at the clinic where she worked weekends handed her a card. My sister saw you online. Said, You were that lady from the hospital video. What video? Lena asked. The woman pulled out her phone. A blurry clip from a hospital security camera. Lena, handing a coat to a homeless man in the snow. This went viral on TikTok. Some guy uploaded it. Called you the woman the world forgot to thank. Lena's stomach dropped. She called the number. That was you. It wasn't supposed to go viral, he said, but maybe it was supposed to be seen. You didn't ask. I didn't need to, because what you did didn't ask either. By the end of that week, 3 job offers showed up in her inbox. One from a nonprofit, one from a clinic, one from a corporate wellness firm. All said the same thing: "We want your heart in our building." Lena didn't know which to take, so she asked Noah. He pointed to her hands. "I like when you help people with these." She chose the clinic, but with visibility came whispers, online trolls, doubters, a neighbor who asked, "So, how rich are you now?" Even Gloria started getting calls. "You think she's lying?" Someone asked her. Gloria replied, "She's not the one lying. She's just finally being seen." Lena stood at the center of something growing, but she didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed, grateful, hopeful, but terrified, because she knew, when life gives you more than you've ever had, it can vanish just as fast. Lena had been poor before. She had been exhausted, overworked, alone. But this was different. This was the fear of having something beautiful, tender, real, and losing it all in one breath. It started slowly. The diner let her go, quietly. "You're too public now," they said. "Feels weird." Her neighbor stopped talking to her. Didn't say why. Just began closing the door faster. The internet, which had briefly lifted her name into the light, now turned fickle. She probably made the whole story up. Fake kindness, real money. No one helps for nothing. "Your 15 minutes are almost up." She stopped reading the comments, but they echoed anyway. The worst part? She began to wonder if they were right. Who was she now? A working-class single mom? A charity case? A symbol? She'd never wanted attention. Only stability. Now she had neither. Noah asked why they didn't go to the park anymore. Lena said, "Just busy, baby." But the truth was, she didn't want to be seen. Not like this. Not when she was unraveling. She called the number. The voice picked up on the second ring. "I need to know who you are," she said. "I need to know this is real." A pause. "Meet me tomorrow," the voice replied. The next morning, she was standing outside a quiet cafe in South Loop. Cold wind. Nervous hands. Then the door opened. He was already sitting inside. Not a disguise. No fake beard. Just a man in a wool coat with eyes that had seen too much. "Nathan Cole," he said, standing. "You deserve to know the name." She froze. "You're that Nathan Cole?" He nodded. "Tech investor. Philanthropist. Billionaire recluse. Rumors. Tabloids. Scandals. Disappearances. And now this?" She sat down slowly. "Why me?" He folded his hands. "Because when I had everything, I still didn't trust anyone. I watched people give only when it benefited them. Until you gave when no one was looking." He leaned forward. "I wasn't testing you. I was hoping you existed." Lena stared at her coffee. It didn't make her feel better. It made her feel small. So this was what? A project? No, this was a beginning. He slid over a check. 5 figures. Lena didn't touch it. "What do you want me to do for it?" He looked at her. "Nothing. But I hope you'll let it build something." She didn't take the check that day. She walked home empty-handed. But later that night, after Noah was asleep, she opened the drawer where she kept the other envelope. The first one. She held it to her chest and cried. The next week, she received another letter. Not from Nathan. From the hospital. "You've been banned from volunteering. Effective immediately." No explanation. No hearing. Just bureaucracy shutting a door she once gave her soul to. She stood outside the glass doors of the hospital at midnight. Watched patients be wheeled past, nurses move like ghosts, janitors wiping what would be forgotten by morning. She wasn't allowed back in, even though she never left her heart there. She took Noah to the park the next day. He ran up to her, breathless, grinning. "Mama, that man is on the bench again. The one you helped." She turned. Nathan, sitting, calm, waiting. They talked for hours. About childhood, faith, money, shame. About how sometimes the biggest thing a person can do is stay kind after they've been hurt. About how some people never stop cleaning, even after the mess isn't theirs anymore. Before he left, he said, "You don't need saving, Lena, but the world needs reminding." Reminding of what? He smiled. "That you exist." It hit the internet on a Thursday morning. A single clip from the hospital's security footage, grainy black and white. Lena walking into frame, coat in hand. She kneels beside a man shivering on the bench, wraps him gently, hands him a takeout box, smiles, says something the mic doesn't catch, then walks away into falling snow. No music, no edits, just raw, silent kindness. The clip was 26 seconds long. It took less than an hour to go viral. By noon, news outlets picked it up. Single mom's small act changes billionaire's life. Who is Lena? The woman who made a titan cry. By nightfall, her name trended in 5 countries. And then Nathan spoke. He released a single statement. I went looking for real kindness. I found it on a hospital bench at 2 a.m. in the form of a woman who had nothing and gave anyway. He ended it with one sentence. The world would be a better place if more power sat at the feet of people like Lena. Every network wanted an interview. Podcasts, panels, book agents, nonprofits, TV producers. Even Oprah's team called. Lena declined them all. She stood in her tiny kitchen, the floor still peeling at the corners, staring at her phone like it was a foreign object. Noah tugged her shirt. Are we famous? She knelt down. Maybe, but being good is better than being famous. Meanwhile, something shifted in the city. Strangers handed her free coffee. Bus drivers waved her on without asking for fare. A stranger offered to pay off her utility bill. But the real change? It came from the quiet ones. A custodian at the clinic left a note on her locker. You gave me permission to stop hiding. A grocery store cashier told her. My mom saw your video. She cried, said she'd forgotten what good people looked like. A man in a wheelchair approached her outside the pharmacy. I thought no one saw us anymore. You reminded me we're still visible. Nathan texted her once that week. This was never meant to be a spectacle. She replied, it was never a secret either. But visibility came with backlash too. A cable news anchor called her a manufactured savior. A viral thread accused her of being strategically poor. Someone even sent a fake GoFundMe link in her name. She didn't care, because for every troll, 10 more people wrote her things like, my mom left when I was little. I always wondered if kindness still lived in the world. You showed me it does. Then came the award. A humanitarian foundation named her Citizen of the Year. She didn't attend the gala, but she recorded a video. I don't believe in heroes. I believe in habits. The habit of noticing. The habit of sharing. The habit of not walking past pain. Kindness isn't loud. It's consistent. The final clip of that video? Her walking Noah to school. Hand in hand. No makeup. No spotlight. Just a mother doing what mothers do. It got more views than the first video, and somewhere across the world, a billionaire sat in silence, watching her light ripple into places money could never reach. He whispered, that's what wealth should do. Amplify the quiet. The spotlight never stays gentle. After the praise came the pressure, and after the kindness came the claws. Lena started getting letters at her apartment. Some sweet, most suspicious. You're a fraud. Tell us how much you were paid. No one's that good without a camera rolling. One envelope held nothing but a torn-up photo of her and Noah at the park. Another had no return address, just 2 words. Sit down. Her trash was rifled through. A neighbor stopped holding the elevator door. Someone posted her address on Reddit. She unplugged the TV, deleted all her social media. She couldn't control the narrative, so she stopped trying. She just lived. She kept walking Noah to school, kept making peanut butter sandwiches, kept showing up to the clinic job that finally felt like a place she belonged. But the air was different now. Tense. Watched. Split between admiration and suspicion. Even the clinic director pulled her aside. Some donors are worried, he said. They think the attention is turning political. I didn't ask for any of this, Lena replied. I know, he said, but you're in it now. Nathan called less. But when he did, he was deliberate. There's a cost to being a symbol, he said. I never asked to be one. That's what makes you one. One morning, Lena walked out to find her tires slashed. No cameras, no note, but she knew. Someone wanted her to disappear quietly. Someone wanted to remind her she wasn't part of the world she'd accidentally stepped into. She cried that night, not because of the tires, but because Noah asked, "Did someone hurt you, Mama?" And she didn't know how to answer in a way that didn't steal his light. The next week, something happened. The receptionist at the clinic, Rosa, started walking Lena to her car. Then a delivery driver she barely knew offered to give her a ride if she ever needed it. And one day, when she opened her locker at work, a sticky note waited for her. "We see what they're doing. We're not letting them win." No name, just a circle drawn in marker, a quiet symbol of solidarity. One afternoon, Lena saw a custodian she'd never met before wiping down the clinic lobby. She said hello. He smiled and said, "I'm here because of you." "Me? I applied after I saw your story. Figured maybe the world still had some good in it." She didn't say anything, just nodded, her throat too tight to speak. At night, she started writing again. Not for the world, not for a blog, just in a notebook she kept in the kitchen drawer. One entry read, "I was never afraid of being poor. I was afraid of being erased." Another, "They can't cancel kindness. They can only try to scare it quiet." The threats didn't stop, but something shifted in her. She no longer bent. She stood, still tired, still scared, but taller than the fear now, because when the world tried to fold her inward, she unfolded louder. It didn't come with applause. There was no ceremony, no grand speech, no stage headline. Recognition found Lena like everything else in her life had, quietly. It started with a hallway nod from a nurse who'd never spoken to her. Then a post-it note in her locker. "Because of you, I asked for a raise." Then came the ripple, slow, human, undeniable. The custodian who used to avoid eye contact began walking with her to the elevator. The receptionist who once rolled her eyes now brought her coffee. A junior doctor stopped her one night and said, "I saw the clip. I didn't know people like you worked this hard. I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner." One evening, Lena walked into the staff lounge and found it completely still. All eyes on her. Someone had pinned a photo of her and Noah on the wall, the one from the park, intact this time. Beneath it, a handwritten note. "Not all heroes wear scrubs. Some wear heart." She stood there, speechless. A nurse clapped. Then another. Soon, the whole room stood. It wasn't loud. It was solid. That same night, Gloria knocked on her door with tears in her eyes. "I just watched a whole panel on CNN talk about the Lena effect. You started something, girl. Something real." Lena smiled. "All I wanted was a safe place for Noah. And you gave safety to people you'll never even meet." Nathan showed up the next day. No cameras, no press. Just him, a paper bag of cinnamon rolls, and 2 coffees. They sat on her steps like neighbors. "The money part is easy," he said. "But you gave people permission." Permission for what? To care out loud again. He handed her a folder. Inside, documents for a foundation. Named after her. Led by her. Funded by him. "This is yours. You decide where it goes. Who it helps. How it's told." Lena shook her head slowly. "I don't know how to run a foundation." "You didn't know how to change a city either," he smiled. "But you did." Later that week, she received a letter in the mail. No stamp, just slipped under her door. Inside, a typed message. "I was one of the people who doubted you. I believed the lies. I forwarded the memes. And then I saw my daughter pretend to give her coat to her teddy bear. She said, 'I'm being like the nice lady. I'm sorry. Thank you for showing her something better than what I showed you.'" Lena read it 3 times, folded it, placed it next to her old pay stubs, proof of who she'd been and who she still was. Noah, unaware of the storm she'd weathered, came home from school with a drawing. It showed her, with a cape. He'd written, "My mom helps people, even big people." She put it on the fridge, right under the check she still hadn't cashed. Recognition didn't change Lena. It grounded her. It let her breathe differently, not lighter but deeper. She still took the bus, still brought her own lunch, still wiped down counters, just because she liked things clean. But now, when she spoke, people listened, not because she was louder, because the world had finally turned down its own noise, just long enough to hear someone worth listening to. It came years later on a quiet Tuesday. A young woman walked into the foundation's office, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly, a backpack slung low over one shoulder. "Is this where Lena works?" she asked. The receptionist smiled, gently. "She doesn't work here anymore. She built it. But tell me what you need." The girl pulled a crumpled letter from her backpack. "She helped my mom once. Gave her a coat. Gave her hope. I want to help people like that too." Legacy, it turns out, doesn't live in marble. It lives in memory, in movement, in choice. The foundation Lena started now supported over 50 microgrant programs, all led by people who had once been overlooked. Janitors, single moms, formerly incarcerated youth. They didn't speak in polished sound bites. They spoke in lived experience. And because of Lena, they were finally heard. One program delivered free meals, not leftovers, but fresh food cooked with dignity. Another provided work boots to warehouse workers who couldn't afford replacements. A third, one taught financial literacy to caregivers. None of it was flashy, but every bit of it was true. One day, a former nurse at Lena's old hospital donated her first bonus check. Her note read, "I used to walk past people like you. Now I walk because of you." Lena didn't visit the office much anymore. She had stepped back, not out of fatigue, but out of trust. The people she trained didn't need her to lead. They just needed her to believe in them. And she did. She spent most mornings walking Noah to school. He was older now, his words clearer, his drawings sharper. He once turned to her mid-step and asked, "Do you think kindness is like gravity?" "What do you mean?" "Like, it pulls people in, and they can't unfeel it after." She smiled. "I hope so." On weekends, she taught small classes at the library, not about nonprofits, about dignity, about how to speak gently without shrinking. She told her students, "Don't build from bitterness. Build from clarity. Bitterness burns too fast." The coat, the one she gave away that night, had been returned to her, not by Nathan, but by one of his assistants months later, dry cleaned, wrapped in paper, with a note inside. "You gave away warmth. It gave you back fire." She never wore it again. She kept it folded in a box. For Noah, someday, Lena's name appeared in textbooks now. A sidebar in modern philanthropy. A paragraph in ethics and society. A line in Women Who Changed Local Policy. But her favorite recognition came from a chalkboard outside the local cafe. One day she walked past and saw, "Be like Lena. Tip extra. Hold the door. Pay attention." She never knew who wrote it. Didn't need to. She just left a sticky note under it. "Still watching. Still learning. Thank you." Some days she got letters. Dozens. Hundreds. People who had seen the video, heard the interviews, felt the tremble in her voice, and said, "Me too." One was from a teacher who lost her job and started a reading group instead. Another from a former CEO who stepped down and opened a food co-op. But her favorite came on plain notebook paper. "You helped a man who is worth billions feel seen. You helped the rest of us feel worth something too." One spring morning, the new director of the foundation asked if she'd return, just for a day, to speak at a mentorship kickoff. She said yes, wore a simple dress, no makeup. When she walked in, the room stood, not out of protocol, out of recognition. She sat beside a girl in a hoodie who whispered, "You don't look famous." "That's the point," Lena smiled. "Legacy isn't a statue. It's a mirror. It shows people who they could be, not someday, but now." And Lena's mirror stretched wider than she'd ever know. It didn't happen all at once. The world didn't rise in applause. It shifted gradually, like morning light slipping into a dark room. First came a story from a nurse in Manila, then a janitor in Detroit, then a mother in Warsaw, all saying the same thing. "Because of Lena, I remembered who I am." What she thought was just a moment, one night, one coat, one man, had become something else entirely. A mirror, a movement, a return to humanity. In Cairo, a group of bus drivers started leaving spare jackets on their morning routes. In Dublin, a bakery began offering pay-later boards for anyone who couldn't afford breakfast. In Buenos Aires, a small sign appeared in a clinic lobby. Dignity doesn't require permission. No branding. No explanation. Just Lena's story, carried by whispers. At a high school in Toronto, students started Lena Circles, a lunch group where no one was allowed to sit alone. In South Africa, an HR director rewrote his company's employee handbook after reading Lena's quote. Titles don't determine who deserves warmth. She didn't know about most of it, didn't try to track it. She just kept showing up, walking Noah to school, making tea, sitting by windows, living quietly, and the world, somehow, grew louder with her echo. People wrote to her, dozens at first, then hundreds, one from Nepal. My mother was a cleaner. We never felt proud of it, until you. One from rural Kentucky. My brother has autism. I didn't know how to explain kindness to him. You showed me. One from a war refugee in Greece. No one gave me anything but silence. Then I saw what you did with your coat, and I finally cried. Lena would read 2 letters a night. No more. She didn't want to grow numb. She didn't want to be a headline. She just wanted to feel it honestly. Nathan called her one evening. There are government offices citing you in policy meetings. Why, she asked. Because when systems forget people, your story reminds them. A university professor from Oxford asked if they could name a lecture series after her. She declined. Kindness isn't a brand, she said. Let them remember the act, not the actress. And still, it kept spreading. In airports, strangers handed coats to strangers. In offices, employees began using the phrase, "What would Lena do?" Someone painted a mural of her in Nairobi, not as a saint, but as a mother standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over another woman. At the bottom, it read, "Share your umbrella, even if it leaks." Back home, Noah grew taller. He started asking questions about purpose, meaning, legacy. Does changing the world mean everyone knows your name? She shook her head. It means one person changed because of you. That's enough. A journalist once asked, "What's the most surprising thing about becoming a symbol?" Lena said, "That people think I became one. I didn't change. The world just looked up." One day, a little girl left a bouquet on her doorstep. No card, just a sticker that read, "For making people remember each other." Lena watched from behind the curtain and let the tears come, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she knew the coat she gave away years ago had come back 1,000 times, not in fabric, but in gesture, in thought, in action. The last moment didn't happen in a headline. It didn't trend. It didn't even make a sound. It happened on a bench outside the same hospital where it all began. Lena sat there, older now, the gray in her hair soft and unbothered. Her coat, not the one from years ago, but another simple one, wrapped around her shoulders as the autumn sun dropped behind the skyline. She watched the street, people passing, some rushing, some lingering. The city had changed. So had she. But something stayed. The rhythm of footsteps, the scent of hand sanitizer near the ER doors, the memory of a night that changed nothing and changed everything. A child walked up, no older than 6, braided hair, pink sneakers, and a piece of tissue paper in her small hand, folded into the shape of a flower. She looked up at Lena with the kind of honesty only kids still carry. "My mom said, you help the world be nicer." She held out the flower. "So, I made this for you." Lena took it gently. "Thank you," she whispered. She smiled. That was it. That was everything. Later that night, Lena walked home slower than usual. She passed the mural they'd painted in Bronzeville, her silhouette kneeling to hand someone a coat. The title? Be the Warmth. She didn't stop. She just nodded at it like an old friend. When she got home, she found Noah on the couch, now a teenager, finishing a school project. "I quoted you," he said. "Me?" "Yeah, for the Who Inspires You essay." She smiled. "What did you write?" He flipped the screen. The first line read, My mom taught me that helping someone without being asked is one of the bravest things you can do. She swallowed. That's pretty good. You're better. That night, Lena made tea, sat at the kitchen table, took out an old envelope. The check Nathan had once given her, long since cashed, but she kept the paper. Faded ink, crinkled edges. She flipped it over, wrote one more line. None of this was supposed to happen, but I'm so glad it did. She placed the tissue flower in a jar beside her window. It wilted slightly by morning, but the color never left. Somewhere across the country, a stranger helped someone without being asked. No camera, no spotlight, just a moment passed from heart to hand. That's how legacies last. That's how love outlives time. She didn't change the whole world, but she changed enough of it that the world started changing itself.